At this point, you should be familiar with reflexive verbs. You should know that they're used to talk about actions that we do to ourselves. You should remember the 4 steps for using reflexive verbs, and that they're almost the same as the steps for conjugating a verb in general, just that we have this one extra step, step 4, that we add the appropriate reflexive pronoun based on the subject of the sentence. In the first tutorial about reflexive verbs, you only learned about them in the present tense, but it turns out we can follow the same concepts in whatever tense we're using. For the sake of clarity, later on down the road, we might actually combine steps 2 and 3 and rewrite our steps like this. Step 1, choose a verb. Step 2, conjugate the verb. And step 3, add the appropriate reflexive pronoun based on the subject. Because eventually you will learn some tenses where we don't actually cut off the ending before adding our new ending. So if you want to think about it this way, terrific. If you want to stick with the old steps for now, that's fine. Just be aware down the road that these steps are going to serve you a little bit better. Here's a sentence that would require a reflexive verb. I used to shower at 6:30. The verb for to shower is ducharse. And so since it's got that se on the end, we know it's a reflexive verb and we're going to have to follow these steps. If I used to shower, that should be an indication to us that we're going to use the imperfect tense. So let's go ahead and ignore our se for a minute, and let's pretend we just have duchar. Then we would cut off the AR and we would add our new ending duchaba. That's the imperfect form that agrees with jo. And then our last step, of course, is to add the appropriate reflexive pronoun. Since the subject is jo, we need me. Yo me duchaba a las 6:30. Let's stick with what's almost the same sentence, but let's say instead, I showered at 6:30. In this case, that's a completed past action, not a repetitive past action. So we're going to use the preterite tense. Again, our steps will be the same. We've still got ducharse. For a minute, we'll ignore the se. Let's cut off the AR and let's conjugate this verb appropriately. It'll be duce this time because it's the jo form in the preterite tense for an AR verb. We still need the same reflexive pronoun, me. And we can say yo me duche a las 6:30. Before looking at examples with ir a plus the infinitive or the present progressive, we should mention that reflexive pronouns go before a conjugated verb or stuck to the end of a gerund or an infinitive. So far we've only looked at them with conjugated verbs, so that's all we've worried about. But as we get into the present progressive and ir a plus the infinitive, we're going to see a couple of other options. Here's a sentence that uses the reflexive verb afeitarse. He is shaving. Since that's something that's happening right now, that would be present progressive. Since the present progressive has 2 verbs, a conjugated form of estar, and a gerund, we actually have 2 options for where to put our reflexive pronoun, according to what we just learned. We can put it before our conjugated verb, which would give us él se está afeitando, or we could stick it to the end of the gerund, él está afeitándose. If we stick it to the end, we do have to add an accent mark where the stress was before we stuck it to the end. That way it still sounds like afeitando, without shifting that stress to the next syllable. We're going to see a very similar thing with ir a plus the infinitive. Here our sentence is, she is going to take a bath. The verb for to take a bath is bañarse. Since our subject is she, we're going to stick with se as our reflexive pronoun again. And again, we have 2 options. Because ir a plus the infinitive has a conjugated form of ir, we could put the se in front of that. But since it has an infinitive, we could stick the se to the end of the infinitive. Let's take a look at each of those options. Here we have ella se va a bañar with our reflexive pronoun before the conjugated verb, or ella va a bañarse with the reflexive pronoun stuck to the end of the infinitive. Again, in this case, we had se because our subject was she, but if the subject had been something else, we would have used a different reflexive pronoun. Such as this, if we changed it to I am going to take a bath, we would have yo me voy a bañar or yo voy a bañarme. Either option is correct.